The morning light in this small town always seemed to carry the scent of damp earth and very old stories, settling softly upon everything. Raghav moved through his familiar daily rituals with the steady, practiced grace of a man entirely comfortable in his own unremarkable skin. He walked the same cracked pavement towards the tea stall, his silhouette elongated by the low sun casting long shadows ahead of him. The shopkeeper, drying a glass, looked up suddenly, offering a smile that seemed weighted with an unexpected familiarity. "Good morning, sir. That meeting yesterday must have tired you out quite a bit," the man commented, his tone conversational and warm. Raghav simply nodded, accepting the lukewarm chai, the man's words echoing strangely in the chambers of his own quiet mind. Later, waiting at the bus stop beneath the faded advertisement, a young woman shyly asked if he had managed to deliver that important package. He had carried nothing but the memory of his own silence, yet he felt the weight of an unfulfilled obligation pressing against his chest. That evening, catching his reflection in the darkened television screen, he noticed a stranger looking back, a man he almost recognized. He began to scrutinize his own simple, familiar clothing, wondering if perhaps this attire belonged to someone else entirely. In his small, sparsely furnished room, an empty chair sat angled oddly toward the door, as if expecting a delayed visitor. Raghav found a small, leather-bound notebook tucked beneath a pile of newspapers, filled with handwriting that was undeniably his own. The entries spoke of appointments and promises, made in a voice that felt alien, detailed accounts of days he could not place. He traced the loops of the unfamiliar loops and descenders, a deep confusion settling like fine silt in the back of his throat. The next day, he visited the small community clinic, the atmosphere thick with the scent of disinfectant and unspoken concerns. A clerk passed him a folder filled with official-looking documents, mentioning his recent checkup with professional detachment. Raghav glimpsed a corner of one document, showing only a section of a graph line that moved with inexplicable urgency. He remembered none of the visits, none of the concerns detailed on that crisp, impersonal paper. Walking home, the familiar architecture of the town seemed subtly rearranged, the perspective slightly warped and unsettling. He saw a group of children playing, and one girl pointed directly at him, whispering something conspiratorially to her friend. Their reaction was not fear or malice, but the casual acknowledgement reserved for someone they knew intimately, yet slightly differently. That night, he sat by the window, watching the slow, almost imperceptible movement of clouds across the pale indigo sky. Every gesture he made, every breath he took, felt like a careful performance rehearsed by another, more capable version of himself. He tried to reconstruct the previous week, but the timeline felt porous, riddled with gaps where solid memories should have anchored. In the market square, a flower seller insisted he had purchased a very specific rare crimson hibiscus just the day before. Raghav could only recall the quiet solitude of his own home, a solitude now feeling deeply suspect and perhaps entirely fabricated. He revisited the clinic, this time alone in an empty waiting room, the silence amplifying the smallest sounds of the building. The receptionist merely nodded again, handing him another sealed envelope without asking for identification or even a name. The weight of that unspoken history, of those other lives, felt heavier than any physical burden he had ever known. He found himself staring intently at the intricate pattern on an old, forgotten rug, searching for a key or a hidden map within the threads. Every stranger on the street seemed to hold a piece of the puzzle, a shared glance confirming a reality he could not access. Even the simple act of tying his shoes felt scrutinized, as if his posture contained a tell for a secret audience. He walked towards the riverbank, the water moving steadily, a constant contrast to his own fractured sense of continuity. There, a lone boatman nodded, calling out a name that was close to his own, but subtly, critically different. Raghav leaned against a crumbling stone wall, the rough texture a momentary, grounding anchor against the mental drift. He thought about the concept of echo, how a sound wave returns, slightly weaker, slightly distorted, but undeniably sourced from the original shout. Perhaps he was only the echo now, a fading response to a powerful original voice that had long since moved on. Back in his room, he picked up a simple, unlit kerosene lamp, the brass cool beneath his hesitant fingers. He turned it over and over, recognizing the object, but feeling no connection to the memory of needing its light. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to deepen and shift, as if accommodating an unseen presence. Raghav opened the notebook again, hoping to find a recent entry, a clue that firmly rooted this version of him in the present. Instead, the final page contained only a single, perfectly drawn circle, smudged slightly at the bottom edge. He looked towards the empty chair again, this time perceiving a faint indentation, a recent impression in the worn upholstery. The air itself felt heavy with unspoken dialogues, with important conversations he had surely concluded without being present. He remembered telling someone that everything felt fine, a rote assurance that now tasted like ash on his tongue. The question wasn't who he was, but which one of his previous selves the world was currently expecting him to be. Raghav stepped back outside, letting the familiar, confusing twilight of the small town envelop him completely. He saw the shopkeeper wave from across the square, a gesture that confirmed recognition, but offered no answers. He walked toward the waving figure not with purpose, but with the slow, inevitable movement of a memory playing itself out once more. The reality of his days felt porous, a delicate membrane separating one potential Raghav from the next version waiting to surface. And as the final light faded, he realized the mystery was not in the missing memory, but in the persistence of the role.